5 months ago, I was invited to speak at TEDxDurbarMarg, and I was very honored, and I still am honored. I was included because for the past few years, I've been spending a lot of time in Nepal working on my global artwork and making some installations here. And 2 months ago, I was told that this event would be virtual. And my mind went to a roadside shrine on the highway from here, Kathmandu, to Solukhumbu. I saw it on my first visit, and it is pure and beautiful all the times I've seen it, and also about loss, and in its own way, a kind of collective action. So I wanted to say now, before I get going on Today Meets Tomorrow, grieving. In a slow motion disaster, everyone's grieving always has the possibility to be out of sync. With a worldwide slow motion disaster, out of sync is practically a certainty. So whether you grieve for someone whose love was life to you, for your nation, or for the world, I just want to say that everyone watching and listening with you now understands. If you say today is for today, and tomorrow is a better time for me to think about all this. With that, yes, things have changed. And the topic, Today Meets Tomorrow, became very, very pointed. And in some ways, of course, things didn't change, or some things have stayed the same. The landscape of Nepal is very much the same as it was before COVID came. Maybe the human landscape is very different, but that the physicality. History is only a few months longer than when it's all started to happen. And some parts of us, even the core of us as characters, of our character and our souls is still the same. But the change at the same time has been extremely heavy and extremely strong. And it makes one think about what this moment of thinking about Today Meets Tomorrow is all about. And so one way I think about it, in particular, in the situation we are now, is think about yesterday meets today. Because after all, yesterday was today at one point. And how are the other communications that make their way to us? How did they come about? And so to me, there are a few great examples here in Kathmandu. One is the Great Stupa, which is an amazing communication from yesterday to today. And I should say that it speaks of great commitment, of a common set of beliefs and understandings, a powerful belief. And even though I don't have those understandings myself, I sense them. The structure conveys that very strongly. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful to behold, even though the layers of meaning that I get from it are nothing compared to those who really understand it. Not far from there's another message from yesterday to today. And that's the Tarragona Museum, which is one of my favorite structures. It's a different kind of communication, though, because it's about the communication between cultures. It was designed by an Austrian architect, Karl Prussia, heavily influenced and impacted by vernacular architecture here and traditional building techniques. But it also went on a number of journeys. Originally, it was designed as a hostel, and then a few years ago, it was renovated and restored, and it's now a museum and cultural center. So that's a kind of communication from yesterday to today that's really about adaptation, about pivoting, about making new and better paths to convey that central message, which is the commonality, the common ground, I should say, between some very modern and contemporary ideas and some very traditional ideas. And it's a beautiful place, and that is conveyed so clearly. I might say that one of my favorite examples of communication from yesterday to today that was in the Patton Museum. And it's this beautiful object. And what makes that communication so wonderful is the caption there. So I'm going to actually read it to you. And the caption that goes with this, it says, "Only the family who inscribed and dedicated this object to their personal deity Istadavada, could name this faceless image which has no revealing attributes by which it could be recognized by others. Faceless image with no revealing attributes by which it could be recognized by others. That is pretty is pretty great, and it's so humble. And the humility, there's a humility to the object itself, but there's also humility to that caption. And this is not one of those talks where I try to say, oh, we don't know anything. We know lots of things. We've learned many things. The whole history of human curiosity is pulling other realms into our own, whether it's through the microscope and the telescope, or through reports from explorers, or seeing patterns by measuring things over time. All these different things. So we do know things, but there's just limits. We're just not going to know everything about every single family. And then when you look at it that way, that object is almost like an ambassador. It's an ambassador for all the other objects like it that didn't make it through the sieve of time. Because for one thing, there were probably gold versions like that, but I don't know about more important, but there were probably certainly more that were made out of wood or stone or clay. And there were probably families that couldn't afford to make one. And so the only way that familial deity would be conveyed was by heart, by the whispers of parents to their children, sharing it in that private way, and just as intimate a way. So when we think about, from yesterday to today, this is an amazing object to behold. And then you think about all other things about that. There are natural disasters. There are just plain bad luck. And there are times when people intentionally destroy objects like this because they don't want one culture's message to get through the sieve of time. So there are all these factors. And so when I saw that object in that caption, it was just a real embracing of the mystery. And so I'm an artist, and my artwork is the creation of a parallel world. It's a parallel world I call Kcymaerxthaere. It coexists with ours in certain ways. And what I do is I make installations and install them around the world. I've been doing it for 17 years, so it's pretty slow going. I have 142 in 30 countries. We even have one designed, ready to go on the moon, should anybody give us the word. It hasn't happened yet, but you never know. And some of these installations are in alleyways. Some of them are on city streets. Some of them are in deserts. Some are in the ocean. This one is off the northern coast of Bali, off a little village called Les Village, and it tells the story of Balakova. And Balakova was a young man who was the first one to domesticate a creature called the water mole. And water moles are about the size of a medium-sized cow, and they tunnel through the water, and they secrete a mucus that hardens. And when it hardens, it makes a tunnel, and the water mole is able to use that to go down to the bottom of the water and bottom of the ocean and eat fish, or browse on seaweed, or whatever it's going to do down there. And Balakova learned how to train these animals to do it where he wanted them to. And as a result, it changed the way humans could interact with the aquatic world. So this is a story from Kcymaerxthaere. And there are other ones like that. There's a story of the Yariyeye, who are these 5.5-winged birds who can use their half wing to fly through time and space and Faralempt. And Faralempt is a quality of existence as different from time and space as they are from each other. Now, in this talk, I'm not going to go way down that path. There are other resources where you can learn these stories. But it's a parallel world, and I wanted people to have a way to experience it. And it took me a while to understand even what I was doing with the project. And I had an intuition that this could be a beautiful thing. And sometimes you have to follow that intuition for a little while before things start coming together. It's not about telling local stories. I feel like anybody who's listening in Kathmandu could tell the local stories better. And I don't want to repurpose them. I want to give people a new experience, an experience that lets them use the canvas they're familiar with, the landscape, to imagine new possibilities, to look at the world fresh. And I'll get back to that a little bit later. My dream is that we would create a shared experience of a parallel universe, that it would have be an experience that would honor our world, our linear world. I wanted it to be something that could be shared across time. And I also wanted it to be something where everybody's experience was a little bit different, a little bit unique to them. Now, if it sounds like I'm describing something sort of electronic and digital, there are definitely things that are trying to do that. But I wanted to go the other direction. I wanted to use wise technology instead of smart technology. And I have nothing against smart technology. I check my iPhone all the time. I'm doing this with this camera. We're gonna upload it for you guys so it can be watched as part of. So I'm not against any of that, but I'm also interested in a different kind of communication, which I think has something to do with this idea of today meeting tomorrow, because I'm wondering what messages can be conveyed 100 years from now simply through digital technology. And I think that there's a real worry, at least for me, that imagine, for example, we write horses running on the beach, and we'll put up a slide for that. And when you read that, you imagine horses running on a beach. But everybody who's watching, you guys see different horses, I see different horses, and we all see different beaches. So we're having a shared experience, but it's not the same, and yet it's related, and yet it's pivoting from the same thing. But then when I think about that horses running on the beach as a digital file, I don't even know how one can imagine, without extreme expense, of almost creating a guard that would take care of it year to year. That in 100 years that file will be readable as is. And whereas if those words are carved in stone somewhere, that message will be conveyed. And as long as people have language, in 100 years, we will have shared this parallel universe across time. When I met Nima, who eventually was kind enough to invite me to install some pieces in an installation on his land in Solukhumbu, I think that was what struck him the most, was this idea that in a familiar environment, and he's a person who's really he runs a place called Dimu, and he's really focused on the green aspect and sustainability and even harvesting in the traditional ways there. At the same time, he loved the idea that we were going to be doing something that would invite people to see something wholly new. And I think that I love the fact that we're in sort of this balance of a traditional space, very old-fashioned way of telling a story, and yet also imagining incredible possibilities. And so one of the ones we installed on his property was this word, because in Kcymaerxthaere there are these shape words that have meaning. It's a shape language. And again, I won't go into all the details, but in the story, one of those yarayeye, those huge birds I was talking about that are 5.5 wings, drop one of these stones. And so you can see it there, and you can visit there, you can walk around it. And it's interesting because it has integrity, but it's also in this landscape where it's unexpected. And another partner of mine, Kuldeep, who's in Sanja Jila, a few hours to the west from Kathmandu. One of the things that we talked about as we were deciding how to do it and where the installation should be done was just something I had not been aware of, but that this real strong sense of place, and the idea that so many places have special meanings in Nepal, and that therefore for him that idea of layering another meaning was actually kind of exciting and appropriate, and would also be we're going to do one that's going to be built around one of the trees that people like to stop under to get some shade and maybe drink some water, and have a story there. that sometimes you can have somebody in your community your whole life and never realize how special they were. But I think the connection for today meeting tomorrow is this whole idea of how do we look at things in a new way that respects the potential beauty of our natural world and our real world. And I think it's a challenge that we're all facing around the world. There's that place, the Garden of Dreams. And I think probably some of you are smiling as I say Garden of Dreams. I mentioned it to many Nepali people. The first thing they say is, oh, that's for lovebirds, and they're absolutely right. But I saw something there that I'm sure everybody here is familiar with, but maybe I can put it in a slightly different context. And that is that there's this huge slab of stone on which is written the verses, some of the verses of Omar Khayyam. And in the great earthquake many decades ago, it fell down and it cracked. And it was restored and was put back. And when you look at it, though, you think it looks great, and you think it's amazing that they were able to restore those little grape leaves that are all over the stone. And of course, as probably you know, those grape leaves were actually carved by somebody to hide the cracks. And I think that it's a beautiful metaphor of resilience, of recognizing the impact one's taken, the hurt one's taken, and making the best of it, but not trying to forget about that part of one's past, but accepting it and moving forward. And I think that, it's quite lovely. It's a great story. When you see it in person, you really are struck by the skill and the cleverness of the person who did it. But the other thing that struck me is that whoever did it realized something. And what they realized is that after the earthquake, the real risk to that stone wasn't another earthquake, even though there are aftershocks. The real risk to that stone was human beings saying to themselves, it's imperfect, it's damaged, we may as well throw it away and start over. And by putting those grape leaves on it, the grapevines, he or she changed our perception of it, and that protected it, because nobody looked at it that way. They never thought of it that way. And I even suspect that maybe even the way that it was reinstalled was impacted by somebody who obviously eventually realized that it was still cracked, but had the desire to be sure that it was a little bit safer. And so the point is that I really think the word resilience is important there. And I think one of the things I hope for Kcymaerxthaere is that in our process of working together here in Nepal, that it does invite people to look at the world fresh, look at new challenges, and be part of a resilient attitude, to be connections that are unseen, just like, and we think of unseen things, we're afraid of them now because of COVID, and that's for good reason. And so I think it's important, and we're afraid of touching things, or we're worried that there are ways to get sick and other people, and there's this distancing which must happen for health reasons. But at the same time, we can't let it undermine who we are in the long run. And so how do we navigate that? Because the science is pretty clear. And so one way to do that is to find other ways to connect. And in a tiny way, I hope that this project that I've been privileged to work on in Nepal can be a part of that. And even thinking about it allows us to imagine new possibilities. Because as I think about what are the gifts that today can give tomorrow, one of them is the ability and the invitation and the demand to look at the world fresh. But another is we can give tomorrow a tradition of resilience. And if we do that, those will be two very, very beautiful gifts. Thank you for your time.